Hey friends, welcome back to Eric Nevins Live. This is my show where we talk to extraordinary human beings doing extraordinary things. And I'm really excited that you're here. We are going to have so much fun today. This is one I was very excited to have. So let me guess. I know something about you, friends. You use communication to talk to people like every single day of your life. At some point, your family, your kids, your parents, your boss, maybe you have direct reports, maybe you have clients, maybe you have, I don't know, the guy in the car next to you and you got to give a turn signal and give them a little wave because when they let you in. Communication is something that you do every single day. And sometimes we do it well and sometimes we do not do it well. That can be a very big issue for us. So learning how to communicate and communicate well matters. Our guest is going to help us to do that today. I cannot wait to introduce you to him, which I will do here in just a minute. Before I do, let me remind you, if you've seen this and you're seeing it on any out there in the social media, thank you for doing that. Give us a subscribe. You can subscribe or like me or friend me on Facebook or whatever. But if you go to YouTube, you can look for @Eric Nevins Live. That's the name of our show. And subscribe. Hey, guess what? When this week started, I had 0 subscribers. Absolutely nobody was subscribed to me. I've got 23 now. So some of you have done it, and I'm really proud and grateful for that. So thank you. I hope that some of you will do that today. Okay, one last thing, and then we're going to bring on our guest. This show is unique, and I love this aspect of it. When I was dreaming about, like, how could we do this, I wanted to do it very intentionally because I think so many people make content, but and you can watch it and you can be passive, or you can learn something and you can be involved. And so the show, like I said, is about extraordinary humans. Guess what? You're an extraordinary human. I'm glad you're here. So I would love for you to join in the conversation. My guess is, our guest, because I know him and I've seen his stuff. I know that he's going to say things that you are they're going to trigger you. You're going to have questions. Light bulbs are going to be going off in your head. Or over your head, I guess, in the cartoons. So you're going to want to ask a question. You're going to think of a situation and you're going to go, hey, my boss said this to me one time. I wish he hadn't. It really kind of ticked me off. What could we do better? Okay, that's great. If you got a question like that, go ahead, throw that in the chat. Put it in the chat. Just type it in, whether you're seeing this on Facebook or Instagram or wherever it might be. YouTube, we're live on YouTube as well. All those places, this is where you want to be. Okay, so put in the question. I'll be able to see it, and we'll answer it at the end after we have a little bit of a conversation. Okay, so I'm excited to welcome our guest. Let me tell you a little bit about him. After 26 years of pastoring, Jason is on a mission to help leaders speak with people, not at them. I promise we're going to define exactly what that means. Today, he leads a kingdom-minded business called Speak With People, equipping leaders to transform their client communication so that every interaction, get this, builds trust, deepens relationships, and makes an eternal impact. Our guest, Jason, I meant to ask you, is it Jason? Is it Raitz? Is that how you say your last name?
Raitz, just like special rates.
That's what I was hoping it was. Jason Raitz, Speak With People. Jason, welcome to the live. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Excellent.
And I appreciate you going full into my name. Like I love that.
Well, so I meant to just double check that I knew how to say it, and I'm sure I heard it and we've talked, before, but sometimes that can be tricky, right? Sometimes you get it wrong. I was trying to think, there was somebody whose name I mispronounced and they were kind of famous. That was really embarrassing. But anyway.
Well, right before every single podcast interview, I always ask them to pronounce their name.
I usually do too.
Twice this week I mispronounced it. One was a Middle Eastern leader who lives in Australia, and I just bombed. And the second one, her last name looked like Evans, but it was Evans. And I was like, I can't believe this. I can't believe it. So
yeah, I mean, it happens. Okay, so let's talk about this a little bit because it happens, right? It happens as a communicator. How do you handle it as a communicator? You're a communications expert. Teach us, my friend.
How does it happen? Boy, that's a great question.
Now, how do you fix it? What do you do when it happens? It will happen. How do you fix it?
Well, here's the crazy thing I think about communication. We do it up to 90% of our day. So,
Wow.
most studies, most research says anywhere between 70 to 90% of our day. And so, I know people sometimes think, well, I don't communicate all that much. Well, you communicate with the tone of your voice. Your body speaks volumes. Your facial expression speaks volumes. Your emails speak. Your lack of tone in an email speaks. The way that you text speaks. So once you start adding up all of those things, I think as human beings, we take our communication for granted because it's like our breathing. We breathe all day long, but we don't stop every 10 breaths and say, wow, that was an amazing breath. I need to put that in my gratitude journal that at 7 o'clock, 7:02, I had a great breath. No, we don't do that. The only time we really pay attention to our breathing is when we get sick. And all of a sudden
Right.
our chest is feeling it and we start to complain. And if you have a spouse like mine of 28 years, she reminds me that she has 5 children and a little tiny, rattle in my chest is going to be okay. But but
Right.
with our communication, we do the same thing. We don't take stock of it until somebody comes back to us and says, "Wow, you really hurt us with that."
Mm.
And that's just the reality of it. And I think, especially if you're in a position of leadership, you've got to take stock every single day to make sure you're looking at, okay, how are my words? How, are my body posture, my whole presence? How is it affecting people when I communicate? And I think that's where, we get to this idea of, do I speak at people or do I
Mm.
speak with them? And there's a big giant difference.
Yeah, there's okay. We're going to talk about all of that because I know that
Love it.
that's a big part of your message. Obviously, it's in your name, but I want to get to know you a little bit beforehand. So um, I'm really curious. I want to I want to go way back, and I just want to hear a little bit of your story. Like, you grew up in Detroit. Were you a church kid? Were you what was it like growing up in Detroit? I know a lot of Michiganders, but not most of they're from up here. You know what I mean? So not from not not from Detroit. What was that like?
Yeah. Detroit was, I had a great childhood. A mom and a dad who both worked multiple jobs, put me in private school because the public schools in the area were a little bit on the rougher side. And
Okay.
I had a very unique where my childhood home was positioned. It was in Detroit. And then across the street was a city called Dearborn, Michigan, which I haven't checked the stats recently, but for many, many years, it was the highest concentration of Arabs outside of the Middle East. And so you would be driving down downtown Dearborn, and street signs would be in Arabic. They would do midday prayers, and so it was a really interesting cultural mix. I had African American friends, I had Arab friends, I had white friends, and I mean, it was, we were all over the place, riding bikes, playing baseball, getting into trouble. And, my parents, provided just this incredible childhood for us, to be able to experience amazing things. Now, for me, you know, uh, uh, the world of speaking, storytelling, communicating really came alive to me in my childhood. So I was at, pretty sure it was a Bob Seger concert because Bob Seger is a Michigan guy.
Okay.
And my
Great.
parents took me to a Bob Seger concert. I'm like 10 or 11 years old. We're at the Fox Theater in downtown Detroit, and we're at the very top of the balcony. And I'm standing on my seat, and I'm just in awe. Like, I'd never seen anything like this before. I mean, it's just crazy, right? People are all over the place,
Yeah.
going nuts. And probably, part of that was the substances in the room, but, okay, like, they're going crazy.
Right.
And I'll just never forget at the very end of the concert, he stepped to the microphone and started telling a story. And the entire place went
Yeah.
like desperately quiet. And I can remember being 10 or 11 thinking, how in the world this
Yes.
place was just the loudest. And now it's like everybody's leaning in to hear the next part of his story. And from then on, Like I've been addicted to speaking and communicating. And so the next morning I wake up. Uh, Most of Detroit was built after World War II. And so tons of these little bungalows that were like, maybe 1,000 square feet, maybe.
Yep.
And so basement, first floor, second floor, two bedroom, three bedroom, very small, compact together. So I go in my basement and I built a stage in the corner. And then I
Wow.
asked my mom to make chocolate chip cookies because they're world famous. And I go to my neighborhood friends and I said, listen, if you come and listen to me speak, I will give you cookies. So every day I would do like a comedy routine. The next day I would do like a message. The next day I would do like a, whatever it
Wow,
is. And then
dude.
I would pass out the cookies. Uh, so I just had this magical childhood, a mom and a dad who, cared for my brother and I, a grandma who lived down the street who took incredible care for us, and two parents that just sacrificed like an extreme level to send us to private schools and, help us to be able to, really experience a giant blessing. So that's a little bit of my backstory. Is just incredible.
Wow. Okay, that was the perfect story. I too am fascinated. Maybe it's a little bit different because, like many kids, I wanted to be a rock star as a kid. But the ability to command, I mean, the quintessential example of this is Freddie Mercury warming up at the Live Aid or whatever, and he's just got them in the palm of his hand like that. That ability fascinates me. It's just so like, how do you do that? Where does that come from? And I can see it with music, but boy, to do it when you see somebody who does it from a stage really well, it's great. And when you see somebody who does it from a stage really badly, it's really bad. It's awful, right? It's hard to watch. I can think of a couple, but we won't talk about those seminary classes. So, you ended up in ministry, right? So I'm curious. So was it your natural curiosity about communication that led you there?
Oh, well, this is this is a little, I'm going to break a storytelling rule here.
Okay, do it.
I'm going to give the story a title, but this is a little bit of a rough part of rough part of the story.
Okay, all right.
I coach storytellers. Don't ever say this is a funny story. I got
Oh
a
yeah,
great
right.
story.
That's right.
Don't lose that. But this one I'm going to set up for you. Uh, I My dad became my youth pastor, and my parents got saved. I can remember upstairs in our house, there's just piles of vinyl albums all over the place, AC/DC and Meatloaf and, all the stuff. This is like the early 80s. And they meet Jesus, they get saved. And lo and behold, my mom starts working at this little Lutheran church in our neighborhood. And they become great friends with the pastor. And the pastor asked my dad to be the youth pastor. And my whole family, aunts and uncles, grandma, my dad actually grew up at that church, and they all were there. But it was a dying church in Detroit. I mean, dozens of people, just dozens. Used to be hundreds, now dozens.
Right.
And so youth group was amazing, and then it wasn't. And I can remember, it was an older Detroit church, and so like sub basements. And so I'm walking up from like one sub basement to another, and I'm at the bottom of the steps. And my dad is at the top of the steps with one of the deacons from the church, and he is just screaming at my dad, screaming, finger in his face, pushes my dad.
Oh dang.
And then that happens again and again. And the church people that were there were just so ticked off that new people were coming to the church, that black people were coming to the church. And I can remember being at 13, 12, 11. People in the church would always say, Jason, you're going to be a pastor someday. You're going to be a pastor. And I would always go back to those memories of my dad getting chewed out and yelled at and screamed at. And I would say, there's absolutely no way I'm going to be a pastor. That's not going to happen. Not
Yeah.
ever going to happen.
Of course.
So, they end up getting pushed out of the church along with the pastor. So much family pain, so much hurt. And we end up going, I go through high school, and all through high school, I go to this private Lutheran school, and there, I lead the chapels, and, so I'm up in front and, I'm leading the different things and everyone's like, you're going to be a pastor someday. My senior yearbook says I'm most likely to be the next Billy Graham. So,
Okay.
there it is.
No pressure.
Just
No pressure.
no pressure.
Right? Okay, great.
Yeah. Super fun.
Worldwide ministry.
So I go to school because I love music. And so I was a music major and I'm going to be a music major. And, you know, 1 year in, I just wasn't great at school. I struggled. I scored my ACT, my age on the ACT. I just struggled with school. I loved playing my trumpet. I loved band. I loved all of that, but it just didn't feel like that. It never felt like that was the right place. Anyways, between freshman and sophomore year, my girlfriend and I are at this Baptist Sunday school convention. No air conditioning, no phones at that point. We don't have cell phones. And there's this young evangelist on the stage, just hot and fiery. And he's talking about kids meeting Jesus in New York City. And I've never heard the voice of God, the audible voice of God. But that day, the Holy Spirit spoke to me. And I just said, okay, if that's what you want me to do, that's what I'll do. Changed schools to a little Bible college, enrolled into this little tiny Bible college by us called William Tyndale Bible College. And 6 months into it, there's a job board, and I was a cook at a restaurant. I was an assistant coach at a Christian school. I had no ministry experience. There was a youth pastor job posting, and I sent a resume. I had nothing on the resume. I mean, it was ridiculous. And it was for the church literally around the block from us. But I thought, I could be a youth pastor. This is going to be great. And not thinking they would call back at all. Well, they called back. And then I went to the first interview and the second interview. And it was more of a Bible Baptist church. So it was 7 interviews. Here I am, 19 years old. My little tie. I'm sitting in front of all these committees. The year before, I had interned at an Assemblies of God church. And so for like fundamental Bible believing Baptists, this was like, why are we even interviewing this guy? But we like him. We just got to make sure he doesn't speak in tongues. So they just kept asking me all these questions about the gifts. And so they hired me. Like I turned 20 and started that job. And I'm like, why in the world would you hire someone with absolutely no experience? But they did. And that was 1995. And I spent the next 26 years as a full-time vocational pastor, youth pastor, and then assistant pastor. And then on the side for a season, I started a nonprofit where I traveled and led assemblies in public schools. And so I spoke at youth camps for a long time and, youth retreats, and then started speaking in public schools, and then planted a church in 2013 in the middle of the state of Michigan. This is how we do it right. When we're from Michigan. And for someone, I'm a 4 on the Enneagram, up and down emotions, people pleaser. Ministry was really difficult for me because I'm a vision caster, could grow things, but, could never understand when I would run into people like Dave who, would chew out the story of my dad getting chewed out. And so had many of those moments myself, but it wasn't until 2020, we moved our family to Tampa. I knew that we loved our church plant, but after living in Detroit and Chicago, living in the middle of the state of Michigan for 10 years, we just kind of gave it to God. And then he opened up a door for us to transition, and we handed the church off to my executive pastor at the time. The church is still doing great, but I came down to a church outside of Tampa to be an executive pastor. And I walked into a crazy toxic environment. I made it 14 months. I was the 5th executive pastor in 5 years. Wow. 4 were fired and I quit. And Father's Day 2022 was my last full-time day in ministry. And it probably took me a month before I could get off the couch. Probably took me a year before, I even could drive by that part of town. So I was able in 26 years to experience incredible highs, unbelievable generosity, Like the time I burnt down Bill Hybels' son's home. That's a
you told me
whole
that
other story.
We'll talk about that some other time. You told me
And
that once
then,
over lunch, though. It was a great story.
yeah, it's a claim to fame. And then the real lows. So the last 3 years have been trying to re-identify myself,
Yeah.
figure out what I'm called to do. And so I'm no longer in vocational ministry. I feel like my business is a kingdom business, although it is a business. Um, but for whatever reason, we have found this niche where
Yeah.
I walk into financial firms where there are financial advisors or banks where there are licensed bankers. And I've been able to develop this training to help them build trust quicker with clients, learn the nuances of healthy communication with their clients, eradicate some of those toxic moments that just make those client interactions uncomfortable, and in turn, help them generate referrals, build their business through healthy communication. So, crazy arc to the story, but here I am, and it's just been an amazing journey.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. So I'm curious, through all of that, were there times when you were affirmed for your communication? Like, was that one of the big things for you?
When I was affirmed,
Yeah, when you were affirmed for your communication.
oh yeah, yeah. I in the Lutheran Church, you go through this thing called confirmation, and Catholic Church is catechism, and
Yeah.
so at the end of confirmation, the pastor picked one of us from the class to stand up in front of the church and deliver a message. So big giant pulpit. Here I am. I get picked, and I stand up in front of my church. And nervous as can be, they had to put 3 phone books. I was only 4'4" in the 8th grade. And I step behind this big giant pulpit and deliver this little 10-minute message. And from that point on, it was just sort of like a, here we go, opportunity. And
Gotcha.
it was a real interesting. I heard about Ken Davis pretty
Oh
early
yeah.
on in my parents used to take me to Ken Davis. He was a Christian comedian.
Yeah.
Take me to
Oh,
Ken Davis concerts,
the
and
score
I would
conference.
watch him, like you talked about earlier,
Mm-hmm.
uh, with musicians and how they can just, it's like they play the audience, it's
Yeah,
just
it's
amazing.
incredible.
And I watched him move the audience and the audience go up and down and lean in. And that was it for me. That's what I wanted to be able to do. I wanted to be able to help them. And the first, 10 years or so, my communication was all about me. I wanted to be really great. I am a baseball nut. On my wall in my studio over here, a bunch of pictures, posters of Ted Williams. He played for the
Yeah.
Boston Red Sox in the 30s, 40s, 50s. Last MLB player to hit over 400, 406, and 41. And I read a story about Ted once, and someone said, what do you want to be known for? And he said, well, I want people to see me on the street and go, there's the greatest hitter that ever lived. And that kind of seeped into my head. And I'm like, oh, I want to be known as the greatest speaker. And about 10 years in the ministry, I had just a giant humbling event
Yeah.
where a big, massive event just failed because people didn't show up to it. And here I am on this big, giant stage with barely anybody in the crowd. And then it was like, okay, boom, this is not about me. My communication is to help other people. And so I think from a childhood of, massive bullying, being made fun of, feeling the sting of how powerful words are, I think that's always just been in me. And then after about the 10-year mark of ministry, making the transition to be able to go, I want my words to breathe life into people. Life is hard enough. So that's kind of the affirmation process.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's interesting, and obviously your passion for it, your kind of interest in it comes out. So that's kind of what I wanted to know. I wanted to know, where's this come from, because we all have these, let's call them bits of genius. I talked to uh, uh, yesterday about Find Your Genius to Ramon. So like we all have those. And I was curious about yours. Like where did that come from? And so that sounds like it was just a thing you've been fascinated with forever in all kinds of different ways. Not surprising it led you into ministry, right? Because if you're enthusiastic, you're called, right? Like That's the way it goes. And you were called. That's great. Um, okay, I'm curious. So I've got lots of questions about how this works for leaders because you're training leaders, and so hopefully there's some leaders that are out there right now watching this and asking themselves some questions. Hey, what does this have to do with me? Right. So you train leaders. Um, have you? I want to ask about this specific moment. Have you ever had one of those moments as a leader where you stopped saying something in your tracks and just like changed course because you knew that's not going to actually breathe life into somebody like you were thinking, like you were talking about?
Well, in a training event or just a one-on-one,
Anytime,
because I've done them
anytime,
all.
anytime. You tell me a story.
Yeah.
That you can share publicly,
God.
obviously. That might be a good time.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's funny. Someone not too long ago, they're like, you talk about communication all the time, but you're not that great of a communicator. And I'm like, I know. Like, it's a passion of mine. I'm learning as much as I can. I want to be better. I want to look for ways to improve. And for years, I was just a massive people pleaser, like massive people pleaser. Wanted to please everybody, and so I said yes all the time, and I couldn't fulfill all those yeses. And there was many moments I could I could give you many names of people I let down or hurt because I said yes, I will do that, but then I wasn't able to put the action behind the words that came out of my mouth. And I felt the sting of hurting someone with my words that way. I for a long, long time as well, my brain works in deep sarcasm. It's cynical. I mean, it's just crazy. I mean, for years, it was like, my brain was on a constant repeat of all of the "that's what she said" comments from The Office, just jokes and sarcasm. And I had to really get that in check as well. I remember being at a retreat once, and I was speaking, and teenagers, upstate New York, and it's wintertime, and we're in the area where they have ping pong tables and all that. So I'm walking around trying to get to know kids and meeting people and trying to be the cool speaker. And I walk up to this group of girls, and I'm like, "Hey, everybody, I'm Jason. I'm the speaker," and I'm high-fiving. And I get to this quiet girl, and I go, "Let's high five." And she wouldn't high five me. She put her hand down. And I'm like, "Oh, my hand, you probably saw some dirt on it. You probably don't want to. And then I just started continuing on with the sarcasm, and I just kept saying things. And I missed all the cues from her friends because all of her friends' eyes were mortified. Yeah. And so finally, this quiet little girl lifts up her right hand, and there's no hand. It's
wow, dude.
And I mean, you talk about crumble. You talk about being a puddle of mess. I mean, I was mortified, and so I've it was awful. I apologized deeply. Like I tried to do everything I could, but I've had those moments where my words have been so sharp that it just
such a great example.
It just didn't work.
What I love about that is you were trying to relate, right? Is you were trying to do that, but even when you're trying, you have to be mindful about how you're trying, and you may not have known, right? So okay, but paying attention to the context clues around you can be valuable. Okay, that's a really good story. Well, I mean, it's a solid learning story. Dude, okay. Yeah, dude, I've said those things. I've done those things. I was recounting the other day. We had some friends back in Chicago, and I can't remember. There were a couple things that I said, and that were just, it was politics or whatever, just stuff that I had no idea about where these people were really, and I just said dumb stuff, and I'll look back on it and go, oh yeah, that was not great. Okay. So anyway, but that happens to us all. Well, that's my point.
Yeah, it happens to us all. I'll tell you just one other quick one. Recently, the people pleasing has sort of left me. You get beat down enough by people, And,
Sure.
it just kind of leaves you. And, lately I'm in entrepreneur world, which is, the paycheck doesn't come unless I get things booked. And, it's not for everyone, it's not for
Yeah.
everyone. And it's been a rougher season, the last 4, 5, 6 months, the stress load, last year thing is like things just took off like fireworks. We're like, oh my gosh, what are we going to be able to do? I'm going to be able to bring in other speakers. This is incredible. I'm leading trainings all over the place. And then come February and
Yep.
it's slowed down to a grinding halt. I'm like, hello, you know, March, April, May, a couple of bookings, June, July, a couple of bookings, but a quarter of what I needed. And so just created this massive stress load. Well, with the massive stress load, uh, there have been a few relationships in my life recently where I just I couldn't continue to move forward because of how much they took from me.
Yeah.
And and so uh, in my communication weakness, I just disappeared. I'm like, okay, I've tried to say the same thing over and over and over. They're not getting it, so I'm just done and I'm going to disappear. And I had someone call me out on it about a month and a half ago, and they're just like, that hurt. I was like, I know, I own up to it. I'm sorry. I was like, on the flip side, here's the hurt that was caused. You didn't want to
Yeah.
hear any of it, and but I mean, it was just Jason 10 years ago, deep people pleaser. I would have threw myself under the bus all day long. And I think sometimes, this phrase, speak with people, not at them, which I thought I came up with. I was like, yes, uh, nothing new under the sun.
Sure. I'm
um,
sure somebody else has said it, but you're defining it, my friend.
yes, yes. And so, every day we have this opportunity, with our words. So I tried to pull it from Proverbs 10:11 from the Message. It says, the words of the wise are a deep, life giving well, and the words of the wicked are a dark cave of abuse.
Wow. Right?
Like, isn't that the truth? And so
100%.
that's where I kind of get the with, like deep, life giving well.
Yeah.
You breathe life into people, you lift them up, you help them transform, you speak at people, you suck the life out of them, you abuse them, you talk down
Yes.
to them, you manipulate them.
And it's easy to do. Okay. So that's what one of my questions for you was like sometimes it can seem we've covered it, but you can be communicating. It seems innocuous, right? It seems like, oh, that's no big deal, but it actually does damage. Or maybe you're trying to relate, but you're actually not, and you're kind of making things worse. We've talked about that. So define for us then what speaking at people is, and then maybe tell us what are some of the biggest mistakes that leaders make when they're doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I define speaking at is when we look for opportunities to speak through fear, control, manipulation, talking down to people. Now, sometimes people confuse this with talking with confidence, speaking with confidence. But we've kind of maybe all been in the situation where we've had a boss that, was the micromanager who spoke in a way that, kind of got things done by speaking fear into us. So, these are some toxic behaviors that we've let seep in. And what they do is they build this wall between you and the other person because communication is all about connecting. Like that's it at the end of the day. And you want your words, you want your communication to build a bridge. You don't want it to build a wall. 10 years ago, 8 years ago, 9 years ago, my wife and I are in China. We're adopting our youngest. The Great Wall of China is massive, 13,000 miles, parts of it 30 feet across. I mean, you see this thing and you're like, oh my goodness. And I would contend that when you allow these toxic behaviors, communication behaviors into your life, they build a bigger wall than the Great Wall of China. I know I'm sort of over
Yeah.
exaggerating that, but 2 months ago, I'm sitting in Oracle Park in the right field watching a San Francisco Giants game, and you look across the bays, and there's these massive bridges in San Francisco. Obviously, the famous Golden Gate Bridge, and then you've got other bigger bridges. And that's what you want your communication to do. You want to be able to build this connection, this bridge. I want to keep the connection alive and strong. And these little toxic misbehaviors, they just continue to build and build this wall till you wake up. And I talk to leaders all the time, and they're like, I just want people to hear me. Nobody listens to me at work. Nobody listens to me in my household.
Mm.
And what they haven't done is they haven't looked in the mirror and went, okay, wait a minute. Okay, I've let all these little toxic behaviors build up over time, and nobody wants to deal with you because you're just a pain. And so things like interrupting constantly, you listen in order to respond instead of listen to process, passive aggressive comments, like
That's sarcasm. Get back to sarcasm, right?
That's right. And sarcasm has its place, but we all know the person. I was the person. Every response was this deep, sarcastic, like, nobody want to deal with me. Stonewalling, the silent treatment, gossiping, backstabbing, when we're literally, speaking out against somebody, over talking or manipulating the conversation. You just never get a word in.
Dude,
criticizing without any.
I want to do
What's
a
that?
podcaster T-shirt that says "professional overtalker." Like, I think that would be funny for a podcaster. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Those are all great examples. Those. Yeah. I think we can all relate to them, right? But it's learning how to do that. Learning how to you can't be formulating your response while somebody's talking. You have to be listening and paying attention. I think those are all great examples. Okay. One last thing, because we need to keep moving and move on to the positives. But one last thing I thought of that might be an issue that I'm wondering if you address, especially for leaders. I think in our culture, we worship productivity. And one word I noticed that you don't put on your website, I didn't find it, maybe it's there, is the word effective. Have you ever heard somebody talk about effective communication, right? This is very popular, particularly in the evangelical spaces we come from. I want to communicate effectively. But first of all, I don't even know what that means. But it also then makes it kind of, there's a pragmatic aspect to your communication that can put some edges on it. Is that a problem? Have you run into this? Do you talk about this?
Oh, I love it. You nailed it. You nailed it. Here's why I don't talk about effective communication too often, because I have met some extremely unhealthy, effective communicators. Part of Speak with People, the company was birthed because I've worked for a couple of organizations, churches, that had a very controlling, a very domineering, a very lead out of fear culture where, those leaders were effective. They built great things, but what cost did it come at? And I would rather be a healthy communicator instead of an effective communicator. And so, we absolutely talk about that, because sometimes we think effective is just, I dump the information. Right. I made sure they're getting their job done because of it, instead of, thinking through, okay, how am I communicating? How is it coming across? I mean, the reality is, with the right communication shifts, any team can be more productive. The number one thing that slows down productivity is conflict, and team members don't know how to deal with the conflict. And so they stop talking, and then other people get, quiet. And so everybody else slows down. And so that's why we put the emphasis on healthy communication, because healthy communication is oxygen, and we need oxygen.
All right. We're going to talk about healthy communication here in just a second. But first, I want to remind everybody, friends, you're watching, check us out on YouTube. You can go to, it's at Eric Nevins Live on YouTube. I'll drop a link in the comments. You can check it out. And please subscribe. I would love it if you subscribed to that channel so you never miss an episode. We're live there right now. If you leave a comment, if you're watching this, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, you can leave a comment and we're going to ask your question. So if you have a question, you have something you want to ask about communication, maybe there's something that just really rubs in your craw and you're like, I hate it when this happens. tell us about it. That'd be great. That'd be a perfect thing for us to talk about here as we go. All right, Jason, I've got a few more questions. I want to talk about the positive side. So, you described talking at people, and you kind of described the effect that talking with people has. Tell me about what it really means to talk with people. So, like, what is that like when you think about that and you teach people about that? Tell us about like that particular how communication bring people alongside.
Oh, yeah, I love that. When we speak with, talk with, connect with, lead with, when we really put the emphasis on with, we're thinking of them. And so when I coach public speakers, which public speaking is different than just the one-on-one communication,
Right.
but when I coach public speakers, the primary thing I really try to help them understand is your message is not about you. It's about your audience. And when you make that shift as a public speaker, powerful things happen. I think the same thing is true for you and I. And so, this conversation, a one-on-one conversation over coffee, a conversation with your kid as you're driving to school, instead of controlling the conversation, instead of, talking down to them, again, I'm going to speak with them. So, for what we talk about is, it all starts on the inside. And so, most people who spew out unhealthy communication, their inside is in shambles. And if your inside world is in shambles, what comes out of your mouth is not going to be very great. So when we walk people through this thing called, we just call it the pathway. And so it's just an everyday step by step, making sure I'm walking through this. So especially my leadership and my relationships, the words that come out of my mouth breathe life into people. They lift them up, they challenge them, and encourage them. So one, we just say you got to pursue holistic health. Like your health has to come first. You are not going to be able to speak with people if you're unhealthy, physically, mentally, relationally, financially, all of those lees, you just got to make sure, because if you're not taking care of your soul, you're not taking care of your body, you're not taking care of your mind, what comes out of your mouth is just, it's not going to be great. And so we always tell people, start with your health. And then, we make the shift to say, okay, we're going to keep building this pathway. You've got to embrace authenticity. And so we want to help people be the real you. And so many of us, we try to communicate like somebody else. We, see somebody, how they communicate. So we try to mirror that. And we're just like, you are not them. You are the only you on the planet. And so do absolutely everything you can. And so if internal health is your foundation, relational health is the bridge that connects people, and that connection doesn't happen without authenticity. And so, we're like, okay, hey, and then the next step, we talk about cultivating empathy. Our words have to be empathetic. It's the secret sauce to relational leadership. Empathy goes beyond listening. It's listening to understand. It's, so much more than just feeling sorry. We think empathy is, oh, I feel sorry. No, you don't feel sorry. You put yourself in their spot, and it powerful things happen when you do that. Yeah. Then we kind of shift to, actually being in the conversation. So if you really want to speak with people, be fully present with them. I don't know about you, but I'm addicted to this thing.
Yeah, right.
It controls me. And, before I sit down with somebody over coffee, I try to make sure it's on silent. I put it in my bag if I can. I just want to be as connected with them. I want to be fully present. So I'm with them. And then that can lead to asking meaningful questions. One of the best things you can do as a communicator is be curious. And when you're curious, you ask meaningful questions, not boring questions. How was your day? No questions like that, but, amazing questions. Charles Duhigg in Super Communicators, incredible book. He talks about, don't ask, ask people how they feel about something. So, Eric, how do you feel about, what's happening in Colorado, or whatever that situation is. So helping them kind of get into it and ask those open-ended questions that are just powerful. And that leads to just
Yeah.
listening on a different level.
Yeah.
And
Dude, you
so when you're
almost got a
speaking with
rant about
people,
toll roads there, but that's okay.
yeah, it's just absolutely huge. And so these are the things that, drive our communication and keep us connected while we're speaking with each
Yep.
other. I'll give you just one more.
Okay.
We talk about storytelling all the time, but we don't talk about catching stories. And
Oh, yeah.
one of the best things you can do for your communication is catch stories,
Yeah.
because that movie Inside Out from Pixar, it's so incredibly true. All of those memories are stored. And so if you want to win with people in your life, remember what's important to them. And so
Yep.
when you remember it and then you ask them about it, forget about it. I mean,
Yeah.
you just won.
That works with anybody, right? Whether it's at work or whether it's here, like it just is. If you can do that well, you can really influence people for sure. Okay, dude, I got so many other questions. I want to ask because I think we've talked about this like a little bit, but it's such a deep subject. There's so far that we can go. So maybe we can come back and do it again later at some point. What is there a time that you've seen a leader communicate something really difficult really well?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. Phew.
It might just be a stumper. I didn't prepare you for that, so that could be.
No,
It
it's
could be. But I'm curious what you're like. If what you hold up is like, wow, that was really good. So let me. Well, I'll give you a second to think about it while I talk.
yeah.
There. Well, I mean, I got a couple of biographies up on my shelf here of people. I think the people that I usually think of who have to do this are presidents, right? Like it usually is.
Mm.
So you think of like Reagan's speech after the Challenger disaster was
Yep.
was a really difficult one, written by Peggy Noonan. But that like there's a tone that you have to strike. There's an ability to acknowledge reality, but also have express the sorrow and pivot a little bit toward like, okay, we're not going to let this stop us. We're going to keep going. There's probably some others that we could think of. I'm looking historically because I'm looking at my historical books, but I was curious. Maybe you had one. Maybe you'd seen something that you were like, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. Had lots of fun moments at organizations where announcements were made when people were let go or fired. Typically, that's
Sure.
in the church world. I'm sorry, I'm going to step into a bit of sarcasm here, but
Okay, go
that's
ahead.
they're being called elsewhere in quotes.
Promoted to a tender.
Yes, but thinking back in my life, when I was 18, my grandmother, aunt, and cousin were all killed in a car accident. Same day,
Wow.
same accident. Just awful. Lady ran a red light, had a suspended license, and hit my cousin's truck. Big giant truck went flying, flipped upside down, killed them instantly. And it was, oof. I mean, there's funerals are hard enough. 3 caskets in one room.
Oh, dang, yeah.
Pretty difficult. Families are torn apart. And for me, it was the first time I saw my dad cry, 18 years old. And his best friend was his mom. And so he lost his mom. And the way that I watched my dad communicate with his family, speak to his siblings, speak to my brother and I, carry a level of grief, but then also a level of leadership, a level of compassion, a level of, I mean, it was beyond profound, beyond powerful. And, we all respond differently in those, whatever level of grief you've experienced. And, to see him, how he responded during that was incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good one. Okay. I want to ask you a few questions about listening because I know you talk about that a lot. And I think it can be a little bit overlooked in our culture, right? We mentioned a little bit talking about listening to understand, not just to respond. And so that'll keep you out of arguments probably, hopefully. but it's kind of a, I think I really do think listening is a lost art. I spent a lot of time thinking about it in seminary because you were thinking about listening prayer even, and spiritual direction. Certainly what I did in the call center, I had to listen a lot, right? And then as a podcaster, for sure, you listen a whole lot, right? And you're better. Your questions are better if you're listening. So I think do you have, well, what are your tips for how to listen that make it easier? Because I think people struggle with it, or maybe they're just not thinking about it. So what would you tell someone who's like, hey, I have a hard time, or maybe they're constantly finding themselves listening to be like, oh, I'm going to jump in with this, or I'm going to do that. Like, how do you help people kind of get a hold on that?
That's good. I would always start with kind of a mindset shift. I had a powerful guest on my podcast, and he's a mindfulness expert. And he talked about how most of the meetings we go into, if there was no buffer time in between meetings, our brains will be 85% engaged with the last meeting for the first 15% of the new meeting.
So true.
So for the first 15%, we're still thinking about everything that just happened. And so I was leading a training once with a group of managers from Fifth Third Bank. And one of them came up to me and just said, I got a million things to do. I'm always late. I'm always rushing. My team says I don't listen. And I just said, hey, does corporate set your schedule or do you? And she goes, oh, no, I do. I said, well, can you just put 5 minutes in between each meeting and then use that as a time to just, get your mind right, breathe, reset it. And so tip number one, make that mindfulness shift. Have some time where you, try to put away the last thing that you were doing and just focus on what's next. Two, think about your body. Your body speaks volumes. And so if you're sitting there listening to somebody slumping, you're communicating that what they're saying is not very important. And so, your listening is, going to be off. So, listen with your body the way that you would want someone to listen to you. Always. Now, if you're lifelong friends, kicking back, of course, all those kind of things. But especially in the workplace, if you want to listen, if you're with clients, if you're trying to get to know somebody, there's nothing better than when somebody leans in when somebody else is speaking. And so do everything you can, to be able to listen. I don't have a pen nearby, but there's some great research that shows that if you actually take notes during someone, that puts like something in their head that just goes, oh, wait a minute. They're writing down what I say. I must be important, And so that's another huge tip. Put away the technology. We're doing this all the time. We're trying to get rid, our Apple Watch goes off and we're hitting our watch. Our phone is this and that.
Yep.
If you really need to listen and really engage with somebody, you've got to get rid of those distractions. Because you got to really dial in to be able to do that. And don't forget about the power of the pause. A lot of us, we get into a conversation. I'm just like this. I want to respond. I love to debate. Let's go back and forth. Let's talk about it. But there's just something powerful about, instead of jumping right back in, taking a few seconds.
I love that. Okay, that leads directly to my next question, Jason, because one of the problems I can see with listening, maybe just that I experience, probably I'm not the only one, is that emotion can get involved. And so one of my practices, and I have to practice because I'm not very good at it, and I've had to learn. I learned from a therapist that it takes 90 seconds for an emotion to kind of wash over you, right? Sometimes more, sometimes less, depending on how strong you feel it. But if you can give that pause, if you can just give that little bit of break, so to give yourself just so that you're not gonna respond from it, so that you could and dude, I don't know how you were growing up. I don't know if I was taught or if I just thought, but I thought that that my thoughts were me, right? That my emotions were me, but they're not really. You can actually create some distance and let them happen without having to actually be a part of it. Okay, so that I think speaks to that pause for sure. Take the pause, even if it's 90 seconds. It might get a little awkward, but it's worth doing if you need to. What do you like? How do we keep emotion from being too involved in our communication? Or, maybe there's some other way you might go, well, actually emotion should be involved in our communication in other contexts.
Ooh, yeah. Big question. Emotions are important. We should, be able to be emotional. When I speak to somebody, I mean, defend anybody here, but you'd think I'm Italian, I got the hands going and I'm, going all that, I'm German background, I think, something like that. But if you don't want your emotions to get the best of you, breathing is the absolute best. Sometimes we don't breathe and that's when the emotions will take over and we'll lash out or we'll say something so deeply sarcastic or painful. And so, breathing is so incredibly important. And so, you take those opportunities as they're talking. You don't have to, be obvious with it, like, but to be able to, take some big deep breaths in through your nose and then out through your mouth. I can't remember who said it, but, I prospect a lot. I send a lot of emails. I make a lot of asks. You get turned down, it's just all part of it. And I try to live by the mantra, don't take it personally. Yeah. Don't take it personally. And so, last year, me, like probably other people, just watching the left and the right talk about politics all the time, talk about politics. And, I'm just like, what's happening? And then I started trying to live by that. Don't take it personally. Now I have my values. I have the things that I will stand up for, but I can't take everything personally all the time. And so if I remember a couple of those things, I think it helps me keep my emotions in check. Yeah. And especially for me as a follower of Jesus, if I disagree with someone, I just have to keep telling myself they're as much of a child of God as I am.
Right.
And
you don't
God doesn't love me any.
Everybody that you disagree with them, right? It's okay. There's a time, sometimes you can be involved in conversations, but not every single time. Absolutely.
Right.
Dude, I love that. And you said you were 4 and Enneagram 4 earlier. I am as well. And so I relate to that. Like it's emotional. Whatever on any personality test, whatever it's emotional chaos is in, that's me. That's the one where I find myself. So I get that, man. Yeah, for sure. Okay. Jason, I appreciate that. I definitely have enjoyed this conversation. Dude, I knew that we'd have a great conversation. I knew you would share so much goodness with us. I want you to tell us about your product and your trainings that you do. So and then we'll tell people where we can find you and we'll take off.
I love it. Well, we try to help 2 different sets of leaders in companies. One set are the team that is taking care of all the day-to-day, the operations, all that kind of stuff. And so we help them be more productive. We help them work through conflict. We help them speak up more through our training workshops and our speaking at, if they do retreats or those kind of things. If they have a sales side with the client-focused leaders, we really believe that average client communication costs you business. It costs you trust, costs you influence, costs you referrals. And so we really help your sales team learn how to communicate with your clients in an above average way. So you are building trust quicker, you're making that connection, and you're speaking and using those type of words. So we have training opportunities, whether it's a virtual training, an in-person training, a workshop, that are sticky, that are fun, that are memorable. So that's our primary. Actually, next Tuesday, my first resource actually is published. It's called the Client Communication Playbook.
Love it.
It's a very interactive workbook. 80 pages, takes you through from beginning to end, our 10 essentials for client-focused leaders to absolutely win with their clients. And so walks you through, how to build that kind of communication. So that's Tuesday. So that's speakwithpeople.com. And then if you do /client playbook, you'll see the resource for that.
Yeah, love it. The podcast is Speak with People podcast. You can get it any place you get your podcast, speakwithpeople.com. If you want to book training or get the book, you can do all of that right there. Jason, thanks so much for being with us. I do appreciate it. It was great conversation. Friends, thank you for joining us. I appreciate you. I appreciate you joining in. Remember, follow us on YouTube. Please go and give us a like or subscribe there so that you can keep in touch. Can't wait to connect with you on that platform. I like to end every single episode with this. Remember, you are only human, but sometimes humans, like Jason, do really incredible things. Thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate you being here. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Jason.
Thanks.